Good evening. Welcome to Instructional Design from the Ground Up. We're live tonight. We hope you're alive. That'd be a great thing. And Holly Owens is here with us, Denise Cardona, of course, and yours truly. And we got so much stuff that we're going to talk about tonight. I hope you're sitting down. Hope you have a beverage. I hope you're just relaxed after a wonderful day of working your rear end off, and that's the way it's going to be. So, my golly, we're going to get into some really cool stuff. K-12 EdTech, whatever we have. Are we going to do the Wheel of Pain tonight, Denise? I
Oh,
know we
we
didn't tell
can.
Holly
Yes,
about
yes,
this.
we can. Well, I'll
Oh
just
my
give
Yeah,
you an
goodness.
example. I'm just
yeah,
going
we
to
got to.
give you a
Yeah,
little
yeah. So
preview.
you get to spin, and it's
Woohoo! We're going to have some
one answer
Ooh,
questions.
questions. Yeah, so we call it the
I didn't
Wheel
know
of
I was going to
Pain.
be on a game show.
Oh yeah, no,
It's how we do
we
things. It's how we roll.
yeah we got no rules here, and it's we kind of like that. So we're going to start. Denise is going to read Holly's bio because we want to make sure everybody knows how great she is. Then we'll get into having some discussion here.
All right. Well, we have Holly Owens with us today. She is a senior instructional designer with academic partnerships. She has over 15 years of experience in education in various roles, including high school educator, instructional technologist, and podcast host. Holly has taught both undergraduate and graduate courses in education and instructional design. She has a BA in American Studies from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, two master's degrees, one in instructional technology and another in distance learning from the University of Maryland Global Campus. Holly is currently pursuing her doctorate in education administration and leadership with Touro University Nevada and hopes to graduate in the summer of 2022. She has a passion for online learning, EdTech, and teaching future generations of learners. It's so great to have you here with us today. So
So
great.
Holly, my
Wow.
by golly, I mean,
I'm
if I could
just,
stand up and still be in frame, I would do that. Just our hats off to you for being with us. You
Oh,
have such a great social media presence. You've got over 6,000 now on LinkedIn, which is the envy of all of us. And I just can't tell you, by golly. So I know you've watched one or two of these videos, so you have a sense of the craziness that goes on here. And it really is like a free range episode of some show that just gets away from you. But, K-12 and EdTech and all the things that you talk about. And I think that we share a passion for bringing up the level of identity and recognition for instructional design and the fact that all the work we seem to do in dark tunnels and never gets publicized or receives any light. One of the things that we've promised on this channel is that we are going to try to illuminate and bring visibility to our field and to the people that work in it, and inviting in folks like K-12 or SMEs or anybody else who wants to be a part of this family. And I think you share that same passion. At least that's what I feel when I see what you put up and the things that you do with your podcast. Is this notion of professionalizing and recognize the fact that we are a science and we really have ways of doing things that are based on something besides our judgment. And I mean, how did you get interested in this? What was your key to
uh,
starting all the things you've
it's
done?
well, LinkedIn started growing when COVID happened for me, but starting out with ed tech really happened in the classroom. So that was 2007. Wow, that's so long ago. I got a job in high school in Maryland, and the principal said, "You're going to be the ed tech person." So I did a grant with the state and I got a smartboard and clickers in my room. And as you know, when they say you're going to be this person, you start doing trainings, then it escalates and it grows. So I started doing trainings at the board and then I'm like, you know what? I could take this to another level. So I went to higher ed and started doing trainings with higher ed faculty because there's a little bit more freedom there. And then like when COVID, I started a business in February of 2020. I decided to open my Jolly Happily Ed services. I had
Perfect.
no idea what was about to happen.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? My LinkedIn kind of sits like every once in a while you'll get those emails that say somebody's trying to connect with you or message you on LinkedIn. Join, come in and connect with them. So I was like, all right, you know what? I had about 50 connections at the time. I said, I'm just going to start talking to people, doing some 15-minute chats What are you doing with your life? What career stage are you at? Going to talk to teachers, going to talk to, whoever will just open up and have a conversation with me. So what I started to do is just have these 15-minute conversations. And before I know it, 2 years later, I'm up to 6,000 people following me on LinkedIn. And I didn't even anticipate any of that.
Well, I think that means you hit a vein. You hit something that people wanted to share, somebody wanted to talk about, and I think that's the beauty of what you're doing is that you're not trying to produce a product, you're living in a product. You're actually involving the community that all of us share, and people feel a resonance with that and want to share with you. And that's the beauty of it. I think this trip from K-12 to higher ed is a very common thing now. I mean, within the instructional design graduate students that I've had, I would say a good 25, 30% were K-12. They just didn't want to do the classroom. They didn't want the whole Board of Education kind of silliness that goes with K-12 sometimes in some
All the
places.
regulation, all the
Just,
all the
you know,
testing.
and the parents and everything. God love them. I absolutely worship and adore every K-12 teacher because I know what their environment was like. That's where my mom came from. She was a fifth grade teacher, so I understand perfectly from both sides of that. And I think what you have hit on is this whole notion that there is a community of people like us out there that nobody is working with. Nobody is recognizing. Nobody is listening to the sad stories. And we all have sad stories of being, ignored and abused and everything else that happens in instructional design. And I think that you have wed both that interest of people evolving to instructional design, but also bringing in technology and bringing that technology into the classroom. So, what do you think? I mean, how did you feel when you left and came into the academic world? I mean, obviously stuff went off your shoulders, but what came on your shoulders?
I mean, you're going to hear my dog play in the background. He's just
Oh,
deciding
good.
that it's
Well,
time to
let's hope
We
say
so.
love when dogs make
why
a
I'm
Oh, no,
live.
presence.
no. We all
Yeah,
have,
he's
no,
playing with
yeah.
his toy right now, destroying the Christmas tree, whatever's on
Yeah,
there,
no,
but
that's
Is he
that's
big
perfect.
fine.
enough? Is he small enough to lift up and
Yeah,
show
show
us?
it.
No, he just the bot. Oh yeah, he's playing over there. He'll probably come over in a minute.
Yeah,
But
well, lift them up. Yeah.
as far as like the educational technology goes and doing everything that I do is really wanting people to share their stories. I don't
Yeah.
really K through 12 was too regulated for me. I feel like I had more of a creative mind and I wanted to tap into that a bit more. And
Hmm.
higher ed has offered me that opportunity. Now, while there's a lot of bureaucracy, as we all know in higher education, lots of hoops and committees and things to jump through.
No. Oh, no. Come
No,
on.
none of that exists.
No.
And that kind of just jumping into this space and talking to faculty that want to up their game. They want to use technology. They want to teach online. And this is all prior to COVID, what I'm talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just working with a faculty member who wants to use clickers in their classroom and be innovative and try something new and be open minded. That's the kind of stuff I want to do. Like make a plan, do a research study, figure out what tools work best in your classroom. I want to help the people that want to be helped. I don't want to deal with, and in our jobs, as you're saying, Chuck, the resistors, the people that don't want the help. It's really difficult to convince them to
Yeah.
try something new. You, you
Well, my
know, I,
history with this, and Denise,
People are adverse
Denise
to change. They don't like
adverse to
change.
change. But every time I took an entire private college online, every course went online. And I had faculty that would leave me notes that I can't even repeat what were on them in my mailbox about things that they would like to have happen to me that would end my natural life. And I mean, going through all this, and then before COVID, we took a lot of courses online, and there was just resistance, resistance, resistance. And I understood every second of it. And that's why I tried to work so hard to take what they had in the classroom and put it online in any way that we could, whether it was sync or async or, however we ended up doing it. But the resistance factor, I mean, there were just people that absolutely weren't going to do it. And I actually had a professor who had to teach online. It was a requirement. And he or she did not get in the course the entire term, did not once get in the course. and I had
I
25
don't know how
students.
that's possible.
Well,
I honestly don't
it
like,
didn't happen
I'm
twice,
not
shall we
talking to your
say?
learners. Yeah.
But I mean, that's the order of magnitude that people have about change, especially in a profession where it's built on personalities. And let's face it, higher ed is about personalities in a classroom. It's a sage on the stage. The whole notion of, gee whiz, I can tell you all you need to know and just sit there and worship me for a while. And a lot of us never evolved to that. A lot of us realized that we were there. And I hate to use the word teacher sometimes. I think we're all facilitators. I think what we try to do is facilitate learning. And we are where we need to be in that process, in that line, in that circle. So if it means that we sit in the back and listen, then that's being a good facilitator. If it means we have to provide knowledge and poke and get people to think about things, then that's being a facilitator. But the whole higher ed notion of just standing up there on the stage and talking for however long the course is, those days are gone for the most part. And thank goodness. But COVID, in a way, brought about change that we needed. And now it'll be interesting to see how many go back and how many times we
Yeah,
now fall back into the old circle.
I,
Well,
I don't want that for learners. Yeah. Go ahead,
right.
Denise.
In terms of COVID, I mean, how it changed my life was I actually enrolled in graduate school during COVID because I thought it was a perfect opportunity to learn online and become part of a community and sink into that community. And so I fully embraced that whole opportunity to be able to learn online with a group of people who wanted the same. And so that I feel like there was a lot of, for me, it was advantageous having this opportunity to learn online as was the case with COVID. And I don't think that I would have. I don't know. I feel as though the online learning world for me appeals greatly more so than for me in-person learning because it just opens up a lot of opportunity to be able to work within, for me, a working professional life, to be able to fit it into a schedule, be flexible. But I gotta say, there's nothing quite like being part of a learning community. And I wanted to I want to learn how to create those learning communities, those learning opportunities for people. And Holly, when you talked about how you first started on LinkedIn by having these conversations with people, to me that is so powerful because what you did was you really did create that sense of community and you were curious and people are attracted to that. It's appealing to people to be a part of something like that. To be know that they are being listened to, they are heard, they are valued, and you out there seeking that knowledge, you were able to. It sounds like come into a new pathway for yourself, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, I know people want to share their stories. And everybody's story is unique on how they got to where they're at now, and it's important to listen to those stories because we don't want history to repeat itself in certain situations, but we also want to do better in education. So if you're not listening to the people who are in whether it's K through 12 or higher education, you're not making things better. And like Chuck is pointing out, the traditional ways of learning are no longer suitable for the students that we are experiencing. We have millennials who are fully in the workplace, maybe in graduate school as well. Then we have Gen Z coming up and then Gen Alpha. So the things that they are in, there's my dog. He's right back there. There he
Oh,
is.
cool. What's his name?
That's Colton, and
Hey,
he's
Colt.
11.
Colton.
Hey, buddy. I should bring
He's
Toby
searching
in,
for
but
something
she's
to do.
upstairs. Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
another one. She'll be by. There's another
Well,
little
that's
one floating
we like
around.
dogs. We have dogs all the time. Yeah.
Aw,
They're the
We had
best, aren't
cats.
they?
Yeah. No, you got. I mean, that's humanity.
I have my dogs behind me
Yeah.
there in spirit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Aw. Well,
Yeah.
I have to say that education is a place where I totally feel comfortable, but I totally think needs a makeover.
Mm.
So what
Needs
do
an
you think, Ollie? Do
ambush
you think it's
makeover.
do you think we should be incremental in change, or should we just blow it up and fix it?
I feel like blow it up and fix it. I mean, COVID
Yeah.
really did that for us in a
Thank
lot of
you.
ways, but it
Thank
also
you.
exposed some gaps that we were like oh my gosh, people don't know where to go to teach online. Like they don't know what a learning management system is. They don't know where to go for
No,
training.
no, they have no clue. And that was the thing that we could tell instantly when everybody said you're not coming to campus. We knew which organizations had thought about this and were actually where they needed to be. So if you've watched the channel, you've seen Miko on here. He put the University of North Carolina at Pembroke online in 10 days. And there
Hmm.
were other incredible stories like that that took place. And what I said all along was if you're an instructional designer, nothing happened when COVID came along. There was nothing new for you. You already were doing this. It was a matter of scale. It was a matter of organizational commitment to change and to doing what you needed to do. So then you had this, at least in my perception of an observation, you had two schools of this. One is try to replicate the classroom, Zoom to room or room to Zoom or however you want to look at it. And so there is the approach of, okay, distance learning is about me just doing what I always do, but I put it on a TV or on a laptop. And then there's the other school of thought, which I think most designers sit in, which is, okay, let's make the most of this opportunity in terms of how we can make this instruction powerful, how we can assure that we get mastery and we get evaluations at the levels we need to, create community, provide engagement, do all the things that instructional designers do constantly, but now do it in a medium most people aren't used to. So we still have the old school, we still have the new school. It's the old school with Zoom or some equivalent product, and it's a new school of, okay, let's change this paradigm to actually designing for this environment. So when most of your learners have smartphones, why aren't you using smartphones? If most of them are on Instagram or TikTok, why aren't you using that in instruction? Even though there's the argument that they don't want to use that for formal things, is that their social network. But that argument aside, and it's the old notion of people don't want cell phones to go off in the classroom. And that never bothered me a bit. People are people. This is their lives. If they're trying to work in school and go into college or whatever they're doing, taking a course, they have another life that's still sitting there and it doesn't go away. And if they need to communicate with someone or they got kids at home or anything that's going on that causes you to communicate, why in the heck would you try to limit that unless it's disruptive? And it's just all these kind of mindsets, Holly and Denise, that I think need to change among the mass of people doing this work. Is let's make this a community where everybody is whole, where everybody brings the best of what they've got, and we provide them a foundation and community and a way to get to their goals and not try to force fit people into higher education or whatever it is we're doing, because that's the old model.
Yeah, and I think that it takes a lot of open-mindedness to be able to be flexible enough to have that kind of mindset that you just talked about, Chuck. The cell phone in the classroom. Personally, I when cell phones first started becoming a thing, especially in the office, I used to feel really frustrated with colleagues when they would be sitting there on their cell phones and I'm trying to have a conversation with them, or we're in a meeting and I'm presenting something and people are on their cell phones and not paying attention. I have to be honest, that used to really, really bug me. And I just recently had a meeting with somebody and they were like this the whole time. And I was like, is this person even listening to what I'm talking about? It's really disruptive. And I have a hard time with that, but I feel as an educator, as somebody who wants to become more of a facilitator, it's really important to be able to understand that there is a change, there is a shift, and there is a generational gap even between myself and younger students that I have to learn to deal with and understand. And I think that's really I know you hate that word, Chuck, understand. At least in the concept of, at least in the context of objectives, but in this case, really understand that there are different ways and different approaches, and it's really imperative, I think, as facilitators, as instructional designers, to be able to be open-minded and flexible, to being able to understand that not everybody operates in the way I do, or you do, or Holly does. It's a challenge that I'm up for the challenge, but it is a challenge for me.
So, Holly, let me
I think
ask you
that's the
this.
beauty of
Yeah.
education is that the
Yeah.
pedagogy can lend itself to different types of learning preferences, and that open-mindedness, Denise, is so critical. It's so critical. And there's time if you're facilitating in a way that where you're incorporating those types of things that students like to do, like being on their phones and stuff. We know people cannot do two different things at a time. Multitasking is a facade. It's not happening. I definitely
But
can't do it.
you
I
can't do it.
agree.
I think you're
Oh
doing
my
great at
goodness.
it. I have a counter argument, but I want to hear this out.
Well, I think in the classroom, when you're really focusing on the learning process and what's happening metacognitively, you have to be focused on what you're doing there. Now, saying multitasking like you can touch, pat your head, or rub your stomach at the same
I
time, I
can't.
know
I
people
can't.
can do that.
I can't do it.
And
Mm,
so, just trying to accommodate in a way that you're letting the learners know that you respect what their world is like, and what they're doing, and offering those opportunities. Because I know when my students are on synchronous sessions, they're not necessarily always paying attention to what I'm saying, and that's okay because I have them do other activities where I'm reintroducing them into the topic, or they have to actually think about it in working groups or something along those lines. So right, the technology is secondary to the pedagogy. I know it
yeah.
disrupts, but it's like you said, it's not going away.
No, it's not going away at all. And I can remember having these discussions. So I'm a big believer in packet learning. And packet learning is minute mini learning, whether it's 10 seconds, 15 seconds, or whatever. And I think the younger learners are so used to using packeted interfaces, so whether it's texting or anything else, that that they can take pieces from one place and also integrate it with pieces from another place. And I think as the generations of learners evolve, that they'll be much better able to multitask in terms of learning. And the other thing I would say, when I was a provost and I had to do faculty meetings, which was the absolute worst thing I ever had to do in my life, um, and they would complain about people using phones in the classrooms, and it's disruptive and it's this and that. And I always say to them, well, you must not be interesting enough or engaging enough to your learners, or they wouldn't worry about their phones unless it was an emergency. Why don't you reflect a little bit on how you can create community and how you can engage the populations that you teach, and worry less about all of these symptoms of you not being able to connect with these people? And let's go from there. And then that was 3 hours of throwing food and doing everything else. But I think there's a point at which it is our responsibility as facilitators to create an environment that people want to engage in. And I think there's many times when people honestly know the information anyway, so that they're there because they're polite or whatever, and they're going to do what they do. But I think that people are there to learn, and that you can engage and you can create community. That I really think this is where instructional design at a professional level really starts to dig in and make sense and provide a product that I think is valuable. It's this whole notion of what do we do besides stay in the give and transmit and receive in a basic communication model, which we all know is flawed at best. But if, as a designer, we can say, this is this community, this is how we create this community, this is what they're interested in, this is who these people are, this is how they learn, and let's find the best way to adapt what we do, adapt this content, adapt this LMS or whatever we're using to get from one place to the other, and let's find the best resonance for all of these things in what we do. And I think this, and Holly, tell me where I'm wrong, but I think this is where a lot of people that are used to classroom, they really have trouble getting over this hump.
Yeah. The comfort of the classroom and being in control of what you're doing, it really changes in the online space. You're not in control anymore. The students are going to take the content or the activity and they're going to make it their own. Whether you have explicit instructions or not, or a rubric, they're still going to make it their own. You ask them to do some sort of activity where they're creating something, even papers, just grading papers. You see the differences in how they all write, their tone, what
Yep.
type of voice they're using, the adjectives, it's not education isn't meant to be put in a box, and the classroom is a box to me a lot of the time. And when you think about online education, you're not trying to replicate what happens face to face because they're two totally different modalities.
Entirely
It's like
different.
trying to say it's trying to say like, okay, I'm still going to use my wireless home phone, you know,
Do you
and
have one? I think I have one here in
no,
the
my
office.
grandparents do though.
with the
My
antenna.
grandparents have, yeah, exactly. I want to
Yeah,
use that
29
still because it
megahertz of wonderfulness. Yeah, yeah, I know.
I mean, it's just things. Certain things become obsolete, and education is has always been notoriously they hold on to tradition, which is fine. But if it's not doing the students. If it's you're doing the students a disservice, why are you holding on to that? Try something
Yeah,
new.
and this goes down a whole different road. I don't know if you want to go down this road, but I'm going to go down this road. Then you can tell me you
I'm
don't want to go.
I'm right there. I'm going down the road. I'm going
I
down the
think
road.
that we need to stop worrying about formal learning and start incorporating informal learning. Okay, I think this whole notion of the classroom in the box in 2.5 hours or 50 minutes or whatever we do, and I think when people get to be adults, that needs to go away. And I think that learning is the whole environment. It's not just the classroom, it's just not the content. It's about this whole space. And this space can be formal, this space can be informal, this space can be all kinds of different things. And I know when you think about it from a learning perspective, do I want to be engaged in an environment of learning, in a community of learning, or do I want to sit in my chair and listen? And if I have a question, I'll find the right time to raise my hand because that's the mentality that people still have in some circles in higher ed. And I think the other death knell of academia is tenure. When you get to the point where all you have to
Oh,
do
you're
is
really going
show
for it.
up. No, I'm going for it because I think it's nonsense. And I've had tenure and I ignored it. And the whole notion here is when you get tenure, you should step it up, not sit back and relax. And it's not about you just standing in front of the group or sitting in front of a table in a classroom anymore. Okay, let's join this generation of learners. This generation of learners want to be engaged. They want to see value. They want to know what they're going to get out of it, and they don't want to be caged in. They want to be able to free to explore what they can do with this and how it works in their life and everything else. And I honestly think in the next 20 years, we're going to see an evolution where informal learning and formal learning are almost synonymous in terms of how we engage them as instructional designers.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of informal learning, formal learning, let's transition a little bit to to the ed tech
Oh, Denise.
because yes, I want to learn more about this. I
She's
do.
pulling you off the soapbox
I'm
for now.
sorry,
Just
Yeah.
but
just
it's a
for now.
legitimate soapbox, and I believe the same thing. I
Totally.
think tenured people should definitely be stepping up their game, not sitting and resting on their laurels. It's, I don't know if it's lack of incentivization that creates that sort of
After,
just,
yeah, they get
what
tenure. Like
causes that.
it's
But anyway, I digress. Moving forward to EdTech. Talk a little bit about EdTech for people who are tuning in post production or right now live with us. What is EdTech? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
well, I always ask that question on my podcast, and I get a variety of different answers about what ed tech is. And I think it's anything in the education space that either impacts the classroom directly or indirectly. It could be something handheld that the students are using. It could be a system that they're logging on the computer technology. It could be something like a CRM. It could be something like a portal. So ed tech to me encompasses not just things that happen in the classroom or that are used in the classroom, things that are on the peripheral of ed tech that are impacting the student learning experience. So, when you go into undergrad, there's a lot of different things that you have to understand, like how to register, where do you go for financial aid, where do you go to talk to your advisor. I remember when I was at UMBC, I think it took to about my junior year to really know the whole process of doing everything, and that was back in the early 2000s. So it's advanced a lot since then. So educational technology to me at its core is the stuff that's in the classroom. that the teachers, the facilitators are using to enhance, engage students. But there's also that stuff that exists on the peripheral, and I have a lot of guests on my show that talk about it, because those things, while they might not be directly related to the classroom, they're impacting the learning experience or the education experience and the journey of the student overall.
Hmm.
So I think
Yeah.
that's fascinating. And tell us more about your podcast. Tell us about your outreach with this. And I know you have a goal for all this, right?
Yep.
There's an endpoint that you want to reach because I don't know you well, but I know I can see in your eyes that you have something that you want people to know and people to be able to do. And so tell us about all this. I think it's fascinating. I love it.
Well, the podcast I told my niche is like ed tech. Like I just love technology. I can break it down for you. I can train anybody. My 80-year-old grandparents have tablets and laptops, and their Christmas lights come on with Alexa. They know how to work everything.
Can you come over?
So if
Oh my goodness.
yes,
Come to the
absolutely,
mountains and
I'm
help me.
happy to. I'm happy to. It's just it's you if you think about it, think of, older generations, like bending over hurts your back. Not going in and plugging in all those things, or asking, Alexa the weather or what the news is, or just some of these things simplify it for them. And that's what ed tech does in the classroom. So the podcast, I talked to a friend of mine at the EdUp Experience, Alvin Freitas and Joe Salustio, and I was like, I have this idea. I don't know if I want to do it. I messaged Alvin on LinkedIn. I was like, I should start a podcast about ed tech. He's like, I was wondering what took you so long.
See,
So
perfect.
what I right, so what I decided to do is I'm just gonna interview people from ed tech companies that I love or technologies that I use, and that's how it started. And then now it's at a point where they're emailing me and they want to be on the show.
Of
So
Nice.
course.
anybody that is on the show is either like account executives who are working in the industry. They might be former educators talking about how their technology impacts learning or impacts the classroom, what they're doing to change it. And if you listen to some of the episodes, the stories that some of these CEOs have about why they grew this company or why they created this technology, it's so it's so invigorating to listen to them, because most of their stories stem from the fact that they had a bad learning experience or they
Hmm.
wanted to help other students succeed. So it's like the struggling learners are the ones who are making these fantastically wonderful technologies that are helping us in the classroom. Like everyone has a story. And my end goal here is to really eliminate the fear and the resistors,
Yeah,
because it takes away from what education is all about. And you guys have touched on it many a times. It's about the community. When you feel like you're a part of something that's greater than yourself, there's no limit to what you can do or what you feel like you can do. And having those initial conversations of 15 minutes with people, I still talk to some of those people, and they're some of my very best friends that I've never met in person.
exactly.
So, what that says about the virtual world and the community and technology, imagine how that would feel in the online space or in your classroom when you're developing things with your students. I think the podcast is really for them to share their experiences. And I always tell them is share your story, but also talk about, you know, the features of their products and what people love the most. Need is the mother of invention. I love that.
Yeah.
It really is. And if you listen to TED Talks and things that everybody's trying to propel education forward, but for some reason, there's like this huge concrete wall that just keeps, coming down on us, and we can't get past it. It's like Mario. You're killing all the bad guys, but then there's one right after the other after the other. But I think at a certain point, um, it's going to go away. It's going to go away. I don't know if it'll be in any of our lifetimes, but technology being a thing, like where it's like, I don't want to use technology. I can't do it. I don't know how to navigate it. It's too hard for me. I'm going to stop hearing those things eventually, I hope. I might be 80 years
Yeah.
old, but
Well,
there'll be a
you might
day,
even be my
hopefully.
age when that happens. Good evening to Mona. So glad you're with us again tonight. Glad you're one of our regulars, and we appreciate that, Mona.
Mhm.
And I think, like anything, technology will arrive when we realize we're not using it. Technology arrives when we don't think about it.
Mm.
Technology is second nature, and therefore, and you can see this if you go through the 8 generations of learning as I define them, or if you look at other definitions of how learning has evolved. There's turning points, and the printing press was a turning point, and radio was a turning point, and television was a turning point, and the internet was a turning point, and I think social media is a turning point. And I think we are going to get to the point where nobody now thinks about how you get a book. They pick it up and read it. They don't think about how it was printed or how it was written. When you watch television, whether you watch it on cable or whatever you do, you don't think about how it gets to you. You don't think about the technology. It,
I
it
mean, I
disappears
do
to you
just because I'm interested.
because you see, and I think
Because
you're an
I'm weird. I'm
outlier.
an instructional designer, and I think of like, how did this get made? You
Yeah,
know?
well, you see,
It,
you've got one of those inquisitive minds,
Mhm.
and that's the beauty of what you do. But I think in terms of mass consumption, I think most people sit there and watch television, and they don't get caught up in how you make it or how it gets to you. They enjoy the experience. They like the story. They like whatever they get out of it. And I'm starting to see that with learning. I'm starting to see that in students, especially now as we go through the generational shifts. And I think COVID made everybody turn a corner whether they wanted to or not. And so what we're going to have, I believe, and we'll look a couple years down the road and see how wrong I was, but I think we're going to get to the point where technology will now become the thing that nobody thinks about unless you're engaged in it, unless you're producing it, or unless you're paying for it or doing something else. I've always thought the more invisible it becomes, the more it's going to be accepted and used. And I think it's the same, just like learning management systems. When they first came out, they were the worst thing in the world. I can remember doing beta tests for the pre-Blackboard software that was out there. And, I think I was user two because at that point, we had a good experience with a lot of these people who later became Blackboard and on and on and on. But the notion back then was nobody wanted to use it because they couldn't manage the technology. They couldn't load it on their computer. They didn't have enough internet speed, just all the things. When that all goes away, and when learning management systems evolve to the point where people don't have to think about them as they use them, I think, Holly, and I think, Denise, that what's going to happen is the instructional designer is now going to have a garden full of wonderful things that they can do because you no longer have to worry about migrating a learner through what they need to get to what you want them to have. And Holly, tell me how I'm wrong.
I don't think you're wrong at all. And I want to let Denise share her point of view before I go into some of what you just said.
Right. Well, so I think that, as technology will naturally progress and evolve, I wonder, Chuck, if we will ever get to that point because new technology will then come to the forefront and then learners have to relearn, have to now learn that kind of new technology. So I wonder if we'll ever get to that point where learners feel just so free and absorbed and comfortable with technology that they can sort of just focus on the content itself. I hope we get to that point, but part of me
Yeah.
thinks that we might not because technology continues to change. And here's just a funny fact: when COVID did hit, and my parents, they're 78 years old, they had never been on Zoom in their life. I mean, talking to them, they never FaceTimed. Just talking to them on a cell was sometimes really difficult. And because just trying to get them both on, like speakerphone, just hit the speaker. So then when Zoom, we all wanted to, as a family, get together on the holidays over Zoom. It took multiple lessons with my parents for me to teach them how to use Zoom. And it was funny and comical. We laugh about it now. My parents now, they're like whizzes. They're like, oh, I'm going to set up a meeting for Zoom for the whole family. And they have it all set up on their end, ready for all of us to join them. So I think that technology is a great thing. And if people just give themselves a chance and, like Holly said, take away the fear. Take away the fear. Nothing's going to break. And if it does, reboot, as we discovered tonight coming onto this, our back end environment. Reboot usually is the cure for all with technology. And there's nothing to fear. It's just all to be explored. And it's a wonderful, wonderful tool for learning.
Definitely. And like you're saying, we wouldn't have been able to communicate with each other had we not had this level of sophistication with technology. We wouldn't been able to talk to each other via Zoom and everything. And I do think that at a certain point we're just not going to notice it. Think about how many times if you put an Apple Watch on, that you just, when it buzzes, you just look at it because you know that's a notification. Like those types of yeah, exactly, like those types of things. And you're mimicking, I always try to take it to back to the basics with people and try to, talk about things that they recognize. So if you think about a YouTube video and simply just playing a YouTube video, what does that look like? It looks like an old cassette deck. Like you hit play and it has that triangle to the right side. So that means play. There's a square. That means stop. Just think about the things that you used previously before things evolved and how technologies today still mimic how those things work, right? So if you're
Yeah.
taking it, like when I describe a hard drive to somebody, talking to my grandparents about where their files exist and all that stuff, I said, think about a file cabinet. You have, because they file everything away, all their doctors, what prescriptions, whatever. I think about a file cabinet. You put different files in different folders. That's like your hard drive. You have documents, you have downloads, you have your desktop, you may have different folders, and you're just putting these virtual things into those folders. It's like if you were shuffling through your files. And I think that that really resonates with especially some of the older generation if you're relating it to things they already know, because that level of comfort is there. Like, oh yeah, I know how to do that, and I can see your point here where you're dragging it into the folder, and that would be like me putting a piece of paper in a physical folder and filing it away in the appropriate spot and organizing it. So like finding ways around those people that resist and making those connections of how the technology itself does mimic things that they have done manually in the past.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, I think it's just great. And I think what we're going to find, and only time will tell, but there's a thing called a technology point of immersion. So this is where you have in your life things that you never knew you didn't have. So this generation has never known a time without the internet, without smartphones, without all of these things. And you go back in each of these generations and you find the point of entry for technology, which was second nature to them. So, like your grandparents' radio was second nature, a telephone, even if it was a rotary dial telephone, that was second nature to them. They didn't think about it, they just used it. They went over and turned on the television. That's the way technology evolves. And whatever the next generation is, whether it's Elon's Neuralink or something else of equal invasiveness that we put on our heads or elsewhere, for the generations that evolve, this will be second nature to them and they will not even think about it. And the value of a great instructional designer is that they know their populations. They know when they need to explain filing cabinets and how you store things and all the other visuals that are very apt to what we're trying to do to make it go into their level of experience and understanding. And I think the challenge will be for a lot of us is not to go too far with populations that aren't ready. I mean, I don't see it much anymore with online. But there was a time when half the people that came, it was their first online class. They didn't like it because it was online. And that's why they didn't like it, because it was online. They couldn't sit in class and they couldn't do all these things. And you go through that, and we've all been through that. But I honestly believe as the technology evolves and as new generations are born with these technologies and they are second nature to them, I think we will evolve to really incredible things. And that's the value of instructional design is we take all of these mixes of populations, the people that have this experience and don't have this experience, and we find a way to make this where they need it to be. So whether it's doing things ahead of the course to get them up to speed on technology, like pre-immersion LMS training or whatever we need to do, we can do that. And Moni, you got a great question. How can we make learning engaging for all? Um, this is great design, right? We got to know our populations. We have to know what interests them, what their expectations are, where they are in terms of how they want to share their time and what they're willing to engage in. And the other part of that, I think, and Holly and Denise jump in here, but one thing I've found is that we can't always have one group for a course. I mean, there are populations that need to be divided up, either by level of experience or other factors that we have as designers. And what I've seen a lot in organizations is they try to amalgamate everything into one course with a variety of populations. And when you break these populations out, you have much more successful learning experiences. You have better mastery because you've put this where it needs to be for the right people. So I think that's a great instructional design question, because that's what good instructional designers do, is look at these populations. And I don't know, Denise and Holly, but I can remember going in with courses that were just horrible. And the reason they were horrible is because they were trying to teach too broad a community of learners. They just weren't ready for, some were, most weren't, whatever.
Right. And I mean, I've had the experience where I've had courses where I feel like it's not going fast enough. It's really, really basic, and I really shouldn't be in that class, but I have to be in that class because it's part of a curriculum of some sort. And it's frustrating as a learner to feel like you are going 10 miles an hour when you really want to be going 50 to 60 miles an hour, because that feels more comfortable and a different pace. And so I think there are many cases where that should be the norm, where learner groups should be split up, and that's where a good population analysis, I think, comes into play when you're in the analysis phase of instructional design, is to understand who the population is, and is this a one course thing, or is this these two separate learning events that we need to have, or 3 or 4 or 5?
Yeah, definitely touching on and also thinking very narrowly about this topic. One thing is not going to solve it for all. So there's no silver bullet. It's a combination of juggling and fitting the different puzzle pieces in, whether that's during the semester or that's during the school year, and trying to find the right combination that fits. And sometimes you just don't. You find some spots where it's really enlightening and it's really engaging, but then other spots it's like, what happened here in this lesson? Like, there were so many times I planned lessons when I was a teacher and I was like, this is going to be the best lesson. I know it. I've thought of everything that the students could go wrong. And it
Uh-huh.
was the worst lesson ever. But the ones where I'm spending maybe an hour or less, and I'm like, you're touching on different types of preferences and using engaging technology, those are some of the best lessons that I've had. And in the online space, again, it's that balance. You're trying to find that balance. I offer options for assignments. We touch on different types of technologies where they're creating and curating things, putting technology in your assignments, not just having them write boring papers or do discussion boards every week. That becomes very cumbersome to a learner like Denise and Chuck.
Yes.
Like, we
Yes.
want something more. This is a learning experience, so we're expecting something greater out of it than just checking stuff off the list. We want to The feeling that you get after a good class is like, wow, I feel like I grew. I feel like I learned a lot. I feel like I can take these things and I can apply them to what I'm doing in the real world. And I also have this great cohort of friends now, or academic connections that I know that I trust and I can take with me if I ever have a question about something. So, at the end of the bad class, they're like, that wasn't so great. And they're not going to get a good evaluation from me. But when that good class happens, man, it's just something. It's just a different feeling. Just a totally different feeling.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's the
Absolutely.
beauty of it. And Moni, you're most welcome, of course. And thank you for supporting what we're doing here and always being on hand and asking great questions. And I've got so many things that I'd like to go off and talk about, but I know we're running out of time here. But
I
uh,
can't believe it's been that quick
I
already. I'm like,
no,
know.
see, we're so much fun. We're a
All right,
party on the
we need
train
to
here.
do at least one wheel of pain, though,
Yeah, you
because
got
we
to do a
did
okay.
wheel of
sort of
pain,
introduce it in
Holly.
the
Okay.
beginning. So hang on, let me grab
So
it. It's been a while since I've used this thing. It's kind of
yeah,
shiny
so
because
we
I have
have
all
all
my
kinds of
lights.
questions on here, and it's just one word answers. It's written. It has nothing to do with anything.
I love
It's
it.
just
Let's
silly.
see where it ends up.
It's blue.
Okay, Holly, what is your favorite magazine?
Oh my goodness. I love Tech and Learning, and it's a magazine that I recently discovered that's obviously virtual, but they do all levels, K through 12 and higher ed, and I know that's boring. Okay, let's obviously I love Tech and Learning, but
No, we didn't say that.
let's go to the other side of me. Pop culture world, I love People magazine. I will read People magazine. I will do the
Really?
crossword puzzle. Yes. Yes.
What are your
You can
favorite
ask me
stories? So,
um
like real
oh my
people
gosh.
that live in caves or personalities or
No, I mean the celebrities. Like I'm
yeah,
have a
yeah.
low key obsession with the royal family, like all that stuff that
Okay.
happened with
Okay.
Meghan Markle and Prince Harry and the Queen. And I watched those documentaries and The Crown and all that stuff. Like I love that stuff. And for some reason, in my brain, it sticks. The
Oh my
pop culture
gosh. Isn't
sticks.
that so cool?
That's,
Yeah,
Well,
yes.
see, I love
that
London. I want to live in London. All of my relatives, my genetic relatives live in London. So I found out I was a distant, like 7,000 generation relation to Edward III. And it means absolutely nothing because I'm sure 10 million people have the same relationship genetically. But it got me to think about the whole royal family differently. And when you're in London, of course, you can't get away from it.
no,
And, being able to be immersed in the whole notion of it, it fascinates me too. I agree with you 100% on that one.
yeah.
And if you
I
haven't been to London,
remember
go.
I've been to London. I went to in 2015. We did Paris like in a day, and then we took the Channel
Yeah.
to London.
Yep. Oh, that's
And
cool.
I was in high school when everything happened with Princess Diana, and I used to listen to the
Hmm.
radio to fall asleep at night. And I remember every minute of just listening what was happening because it was obviously early in the morning, late at night
Yep.
here.
Yep.
And I think that's where when the fascination started, and just learning about her life and what she experienced. Like I'm 2 years older than she was when she passed away, and I'm like, when how could that stuff just fascinates me about the royal family and the business, and
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
could go into a lot of stuff, but there's other pop culture things that I love as well. Watching different shows on Bravo, it's just something that's more mindless for me in terms of like getting away from you all know it's this type of position and job, it really is mentally exhausting being on Zoom calls all day.
Look at me. I'm two
Being on
steps
Zoom
away
calls.
from sleep. If I make it through the rest of this, it'll be a minor miracle. So ask Holly, so do you like novels or biographies?
I like novels.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I love a story, a plot, and people. Happy endings, obviously. Yeah, I also have a
Mm,
Disney obsession. I was there last week.
You know, I love Disney too. Well, Denise is a novelist. She writes novels too, and and yeah, and I'll leave. You guys can do that off channel.
I
Sounds
write under a
good.
pen name.
But
So you
Disney,
Oh,
when I was at the AFL-CIO, I was assigned the unions that represent the folks at Disney. So I was down there all the time in Orlando. And the ones that I had the most fun with were the characters because they were represented by the Teamsters, which
Ah,
nobody would ever
wow.
believe that.
no,
So
I
I
wouldn't
would,
have.
Wow.
I would get to meet Goofy.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, and I got nicknames that I won't even repeat. But I have this fascination with Disney too because what he did, what an incredible man. And of course, now it's an enterprise and the rest of it. But just
Yeah,
this notion of bringing that level of joy to people, I think, is an amazing thing. And
I agree with you. And just think
yeah,
about how Walt Disney set up his experiences in the
yeah,
parks. This is how nerdy I am. I think about how I could do that in my classes. Like,
yeah.
I think
No,
I
about
I
how
love
do
it.
you set
yeah,
up that experience in your classes where it makes people feel happy, euphoria. Obviously, it's a little difficult with the smells. Like my favorite ride is Soarin', and I love all the smells.
yeah, yeah.
And that's in Epcot if you're going to Disney.
Hmm.
It brings you to a different place. And as adults, like we really don't have a lot of places where you can go that where we feel happy all the time, and I feel happy all the time at Disney.
It's the happiest place on earth.
Yep, that's
The
true.
thing that I think about him when you read about what he did is at Disneyland. and he had that apartment over the firehouse. And what he would do is he would just sit up there and watch people, and he would look and see and what made them happy. And he never wanted to get in the middle of it. He just wanted to observe. And he saw there were certain things that made families happy and that people happy and kids happy. And, you know, how much more wonderful are you? What better thing to make somebody else smile or make someone else laugh? And I think just what an incredible gift.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they were hiring an instructional designer recently, and I considered it, and I was like,
Oh, they have lots of them. They have a whole
they have
bunch of them.
they have tons of them,
Yeah.
and I'm just like, I don't want to get too into it because once you're into it, then you see all the cracks, and I don't want to see the cracks. I
Well,
want
you
it
know
to
who
You want
gets
it
the
to
stay.
most
remain a
training?
fantasy.
Here is
Right.
is one little tidbit of maybe you didn't know, but who do you think gets the most training at the Disney parks?
Oh, it's not the cast members.
I would say anybody who's a service representative.
It's
Yeah,
the
like
people that go around and pick up the trash and do those kind of things.
Hmm.
Because they are
really?
constantly asked, "Where's this? Where's that? I'm in trouble. I hurt myself. I see somebody's doing something suspicious. Can you help me with this?" They're the ones that get asked the questions, and they get
Mm-hmm.
the most customer service training.
Huh.
It's amazing because
Wow.
people, like to look down their nose at people like that, which is ridiculous to begin with. They're working harder than any of us, but they actually are very respected and very well trained at Disney parks.
Yeah, and I've known a few of my former colleagues or friends have worked as cast members there, and everybody does everything.
Yeah,
You just don't get assigned one spot. You do
no,
trash, you do clean up, the
you get
person
it
behind the
all.
horse picking up the poop. You
Yeah,
do all of it. Everybody gets
that's
a
what I
turn.
would do probably. I would probably get that job
It's
for
fair
life.
and equal.
That,
Yeah.
that would be me. But no, I mean, it's just a wonderful. We should probably do a thing on Disney and training.
We should do how Disney
Oh.
impacts, how could we
Hmm.
put Disney into the
Yeah.
classroom or something.
I gotta see who I still know down there. Maybe I know somebody could come on. That'd be a hoot. Well, Holly, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this, and I hope. And don't say yes unless you really want to, but we would love to have you back. And I would like to pick some topics that you want to kick around, and I'll shut up and listen. And I'll stay away from tenure and other things to be less controversial. But I just think there are things that we as designers need to say and do. And I
Yeah.
I think the more we get out of the shadows, the more we can make a difference in
Yeah.
education.
Yeah. It's
You're
But that's
welcome, and
me.
it's a huge yes. I will come back, and I'm
awesome.
s- I'm
Okay,
so glad
you're
somebody
on.
pulled back the curtain and said, "These are instructional designers, and this is why you should value them." Here we are.
And I will carry that flag till I have no breath left in me because so many people are instructional designers and don't realize it, and so many people are doing great work and aren't recognized for it. And this channel will do everything that we can with our little world here to make these people illuminate what they do, respect and encourage them, but also respect them because they work hard. And most of us are
Yeah.
introverts. Most designers are really strong introverts. So we don't get out front and we don't blow our own horns and we don't
Yep.
publicize what we
Definitely.
do. So that is one of our little missions here. See Denise's smile
I love it.
because this is something we talk about all the time is we're going to be sneaky about it. But, so Holly, if you want to be on this parade, we would love to have you
Yes,
anytime you
absolutely.
want to do this. We're
Well,
thinking
thank
about
you
going
both for having
live
me.
every Tuesday. We do it first and third Tuesdays. We're thinking about doing it every Tuesday, and it'll allow us to do a lot of things. We don't get a lot of the viewers at this point on the live sessions because people work and have lives, but they
Yeah.
do pick up and post, and that's fine too. So,
Yeah,
Mona, thank
absolutely.
you. So, will you join us? And my guy, I mean, I'm sincere about this. Really, thank you for being part of this little family we got going here.
Absolutely. I'm happy to join and talk about whatever is the hot topic of instructional design
Well, I
at
think
the
we
at
should.
the
Great. We just had a conversation with Miko, and he said we need to be more controversial.
Yeah,
And
we need to have,
I think we
we
could,
need,
I think we could find
the
some
like the
things.
dark side
But
of instructional design.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, the back alley instructional design truths. We
Mm.
could all get into those, right?
Yeah.
So, Holly, thanks so much, and everybody
Thank
that's watching.
you.
this again, I'm not going to hit you about subscribing and hit the bell and blah blah blah, but you need to know this is not monetized. We don't have a Patreon. We're doing this out of our pockets and out of our time because we're trying to grow this field, and we want people to understand what we do, respect what we do, and we want to illuminate and encourage everyone who wants to be part of this wonderful career to be an instructional designer and be proud of it. So join us again. We're going to have lots of videos coming up. We're going to be live at least every first and third Tuesday. And I think probably we're going to be doing a lot more of that, probably more than just the first and third Tuesdays, because
Yeah, we already have interviews set up. So yeah, we will be
so
doing
we're
more
gonna
than
we're
that.
gonna go a little
Awesome.
crazy, and Holly's
Yeah.
gonna join us now. We've got it on video. We have it. We'll make prints of this and put it on LinkedIn. That she agreed to be with us. So everybody, good evening, Holly. Thank you so much, Denise.
You're
Thanks for being a
welcome.
great
Thank
partner
you.
on here, and we'll see you next time, my friends. Stay
Bye,
well.
everyone. Bye.